So enough about audit, right? Let's jump into tax. So if tax is something that you've been contemplating, or you are sure or maybe unsure if you want to go into, but so primarily when you work in tax within the public accounting space is you're primarily going to be either preparing returns for companies or for individuals. Now, you don't only prepare returns, they do a lot of tax consulting work throughout the year because of the size of the companies and just depending on what is really going on. I would give you an example, right? Let's say it's an American, you have a client which is American based, but they want to acquire like a subsidiary which is located in maybe Japan, for example. In order to do that, there's some tax work that has to go into place, right? Because remember that the tax system in Japan is different from the tax system in the US. There's a lot of work there's a lot of nuances that they need to take into place. Is okay, if they have a lower tax rate in Japan, what tax rate is the company going to really be paying depending on what kind of transaction or what kind of acquisition it is. That's just to give you an idea of some of the consulting work that they do as in the tax space. Now, there are some tax teams within the tax industry or within the tax space in public accounting that actually support the audit side. So think about it, right? When you look at the income statement, you typically see a line item that says income tax expense. So we do have tax accountants who are typically within the same company, but just within the tax practice, who help out with really helping us to determine whether that income tax amount is fairly stated. So similar to what I explained for audit, it's literally just the same thing, but they are just doing so just more on the tax side and from a tax perspective. So you do get some overlap. Now, if you are one of those tax accountants who end up doing that kind of work, your busy season may be a little bit earlier, right, than typical tax season, which is usually towards the end of tax busy season, which is usually towards the end of January to April 15th, which is the tax deadline. Keep in mind also busy season for tax. Also, they don't only have that end of January to April time frame for taxes as well. The IRS has a law of extension, so companies are allowed to file for an extension depending on what they may need it for. But that's just something to keep in mind. And this extension, the deadline for extensions is October 15th. So tax folks usually tend to have longer and more busy seasons than audit, because you have the end of January to April 15. That's a big deadline for them. And then for those companies and individuals who have extensions, I think they go from like maybe end of July, August-ish to October 15. So that's just another thing to keep in mind if that's something you're interested in going into. And I would say also, like on average, the hours are the same in terms of the busy season. I have some friends who have worked longer hours in tax. There are also some people who have worked shorter hours. It just really depends on the group that you're in, for example, and what particularly you're doing, and also what kind of clients that you have. And similar to audit, if you're working in tax, you also have the opportunity to either work in public jobs, like I mentioned, or you can also work on private clients. And then the additional caveat is also working on high net worth individuals within the tax space as well. And this is primarily for Big Four accountants. You can either do real estate tax, so mostly focus on real estate type things, I believe, or you can go into, like, they have state and local tax groups. They also have tax groups which are focused on investment management, which is primarily like asset wealth management firms, so like hedge funds and all that stuff. Their IRS is, a huge government-owned entity, and there's so many nuances within the tax code that you definitely need a tax accountant to be able to help you figure some of those things out. And then another thing to really take note about tax in public accounting is many people who usually go into tax always end up opening their own practices if they want to actually provide those same services, but just on a smaller scale if they decide to become big eventually. But I've seen a lot of people, just from my knowledge, who have been tax accountants and worked in public accounting, and then now have their own tax firm where they help individuals like myself, much lower income individuals, to help do their tax returns during like the regular tax season, which is end of January to April 15th. So a lot of people do that. So if you want to, open your own tax firm, that may be something that you should be strongly considering, aside from the fact. But I would say this as a caveat: not everybody who is in tax wants to open a practice, and even if you're working in audit, you can also open your own practice and do people's taxes. It doesn't mean that because you're in audit you cannot do tax. The CPA test you learn in school, it's all intertwined. Everybody has to take audit, everybody has to take tax. So fundamentally, it's just truly what you are interested in and the kind of work that you're interested in. And then I would say primarily a big difference between audit and tax, and I don't even have this in my notes, but I mentioned this. If you're trying to figure out audit, you tend to travel a lot, but it is strictly based on the clients you have. I used to live in New York City, and of course New York is big for their banks and all sorts of investments, right? And the biggest practice out there would typically be those kind of companies. So, but usually your clients will usually be located in like Midtown, downtown, depending, somewhere in the city. So you may not get to travel as much. I guess the most travel you do is from the office to the client. But if you're in audit, and if you're in more like a retail or like technology, you may travel to different places. Like I've gotten to travel to so many different cool places that I've really gotten to see a lot of the US, honestly. So that's just something to keep in mind. But it is audit and it's strictly products and services, meaning that I have clients, in different industries. Manufacturing, of course, manufacturing, if you think about it, right? Manufacturing would be big, but they wouldn't have many plants in New York. There's barely space for anybody. So they would typically have plants in like maybe cheaper and less costing areas around the country. So that's why it would require us to go to those places. So that's just something to keep in mind. Tax accountants don't travel as much, barely do. They are usually in the office. If you want something which is a bit more routine and you can really plan out your days and weekends and weeks as well, tax may be something that you want to strongly consider as well, because they don't travel as much. I'm sure the older you get within the firm, like more tenured, you'll get to travel to some cool places, which I'm sure there are probably partners and directors and all that stuff who travel, but primarily tax people are typically in the office or at their clients. But it wouldn't be any like, oh yeah, you have to go to Ohio for work. Nah, man, nah. So guys, I hope that video was really helpful for you. I really had a fun time just like writing down my notes on it, because it's something that I see every day and I'm in the industry, of course. I hope it was really helpful for you, and I hope that it helped you decide, or really maybe give you some knowledge as to whether you want to go into audit or you want to go into tax within the public accounting space. And for those who are even new to public accounting, I hope that it clarified some of your doubts. Be sure to leave a comment and make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys in my next video next week, and have a good day. Bye.